Quilty zest. That has something to do with making quilts, I bet, which you, I understand, are a star. When did you first, well, fall in love with quilting?
Well, I grew up sewing with my mom. She used to make bibs and little wall hangings and towels and things to sell at craft fairs. And so my first sewing was for my Cabbage Patch Kid, because I'm of the Cabbage Patch generation. But I really got into it when I graduated from college because suddenly I had no homework anymore and I needed something to do in the evening. I guess I wasn't much of a bar hopper. My mom bought me a sewing machine. I went to a quilt shop and bought my first pattern and fabric and came home and started sewing, and that was 24 years ago, and I sew more and more every year, I think.
What is a quilt?
So a quilt is made up of 3 layers. There's the top layer, which typically is pieced, and where you see squares and rectangles, triangles that are all sewn together. And then there's a layer of batting, which is what makes it warm, and then the backing layer. And then quilts also have what's called a binding around the outside edge. And it's always surprising to me that people who are not quilters don't realize that a quilt is not just what your grandma maybe made with scrap clothing and that there are things that you look at on a wall in a gallery and that, you know, see this is actually a piece of artwork and not just, I mean, yes, absolutely they can keep you warm and decorate, but they're meant to be beautiful things to look at as well.
Now let's get this question out of the way. I understand you have 3 boys.
Yep.
Do they quilt?
They do.
Ooh.
They do. When the last boy was born and he was a boy, everyone said, well, hey, you don't have a girl. Don't you feel bad that you don't have someone to teach to quilt? And I said, well, boys can quilt too. When they were about 4, I started them quilting. Not the cutting part necessarily, but they'd sit on my lap and we'd feed the fabric through the sewing machine. And the oldest one has kind of phased out of it, but my 12-year-old and 9-year-old love to quilt. They come down, they always somehow find my best fabric, cut right into the middle of it. But it's fun to see what they design because they don't follow patterns. They come up with an idea in their head and then they just sew it. So it's a lot of fun to be able to share that hobby with them.
Talk a little bit about your business and how you, become successful with this.
So my business is called Quilty Zest, and my background is that I spent 8 years as a quilt magazine editor. And so when I was doing that, I learned how to tech edit patterns and check all the math. Much like books and newspapers get edited, patterns get edited to make sure that what they're telling a quilter to do is correct and that all of the numbers work. And so I spend some of my day job doing tech editing and designing quilts for various customers and checking the math and editing, that type of thing. And then I also squeeze in time to sew. That's where I'm designing my own quilt patterns, sewing them up, and then selling those patterns on Etsy and in quilt shops to consumers so they can make the quilts themselves. I also do demos. I will do tutorials on YouTube and on Instagram where I show people how to do either little snippets of techniques or how to make a whole quilt. So I'm going to show how to make a strippy improv tulip block here. And this uses some piecing for the yellow tulip part and then applique for the green leaves, and then the background is appliqued actually on top, which is what creates our tulip shape. This is called strippy improv because the strips go on at angles and they all look different. And after I do the first stitching, then I'm going to take my iron and press that open. So I'm starting to cover up my tulip shape. Then I'm going to grab another yellow strip and I'm going to put it on top. And I'm going to angle it the opposite direction so that I get some interesting looking stripes. And rather than buying new fabric, it's a great way to use up scraps that you already have. So I think I need one more strip to cover my tulip shape on the muslin. Okay, so I've got my yellow tulip created, and now we're going to get to the fun part. I've traced my tulip shape onto Heat and Bond Light, which is a fusible adhesive that sticks fabric together. And then the next step is to cut out this tulip shape. Okay, so you can see, I can see right through, and I've got that tulip shape going on. So I'm going to position that down on top of my yellow piecing and then use the iron on it. Just adding that background shape in creates our tulip shape, just like that. And then I've got a stem to add on as well. And then I've got two leaf shapes that I have fused onto some green fabric to add those iconic tulip leaves. I've got a small one to go on the left and a larger one to go on the right. And then just going to apply heat to that. And there's my tulip block. So I'm going to show you a couple other examples of strippy improv so you can see that just by the shape that you cut, you get all kinds of fun different ideas.
So where do I start if I want to make a quilt?
Your best bet is to go to your local quilt shop. That's a great place to start because they've got all the tools that you need. They'll tell you what you need to buy for that, the fabrics, and they can point you in the direction of simple patterns that can get you started. They also have really great classes. Most quilt shop owners are also quilters, and so they can tell you exactly what to do.
What's another quilt, perhaps, that you're proud of here in your house?
When I got into quilting, I jumped into modern quilting. So in modern quilting, you have a lot of improvisational quilting where you don't necessarily have right angles. So this is a modern version of a log cabin block, which is one of the most common quilt blocks out there. And I chose a color scheme so that this one kind of recedes into the center because it goes from light around the outside into the dark. And then the orange and yellow down here does the opposite, so it pops out. So this is one of my favorites.
And what about the beauty of the Kalamazoo area? Does it lend support to those who are interested in either following up on your business or participating in art of our choice?
I think so. I think so. So in terms of the outdoors of the Kalamazoo area, you know, when I finish a quilt, I take it out on a photo shoot. But it's fun to go to the local parks or downtown to some of the great buildings and hold the quilts up in front of them. There's also a very vibrant art community in general in Kalamazoo, but you see quilts that have been in Art Hop in Kalamazoo and up in Art Prize in Grand Rapids. And there's several active quilt guilds and quilt shops, you know, in the whole Southwest Michigan region. So there's a lot of resources out there for finding people who enjoy doing the same type of fiber art that you do.
One of your quilts behind you does say, "Do more of what makes you happy." You're practicing this adage.
I try to, for sure. I saw that in one of the quilting magazines that I get, and they had the pattern for it. So I decided to make it, put it on my wall to remind me that, you know, how lucky I am that every day I get to do something that I enjoy all day long. And, you know, even when it gets frustrating or I screw up and I have to pick out a seam or something, you know, that I have to change, you know, I'm getting to play with fabric and I'm getting to exercise that artistic half of my brain, you know, every day. And it's really a blessing to get to do that. And I'm glad that I do.
Would there be a community guild to be involved with?
Yep. There are a number of them in the area. The one I spend the most time with is the Great Lakes Modern Quilt Guild. And a group of us started it about 13 years ago. And we meet once a month, either virtually or in person. We kind of alternate. And we have speakers come in. We have workshops where we learn new techniques. We just share what we've learned with each other. We always do show and tell, which is fun. Everyone can bring in their latest quilt, either, like I said, on Zoom or in person and hold it up, and we all ooh and ah over it. But it's been a great creative resource in terms of bouncing ideas off of people or just, you know, sharing in the joy. And for this year, in the fall, we're actually going to make quilted jackets. So we're going to take a quilt like what you see on the wall behind me and transform it into a jacket. And I think 1 or 2 people have done that before in our group, but the rest of us have not. So we're just going to, kind of share the knowledge and work through the process and all come out of it with, everyone's will be different, but a piece of quilted art.
And what is it like when you've made the last stitch? What's it like to have your finished product ready to go?
It's really satisfying for sure, because many of these quilts, the one on the wall back there, Follow the Rainbow, probably took me 30 hours to piece the top. And then Diane Oakes quilted that for me, which took her probably another 10 hours. And so there's a lot of time that goes into it. And just seeing something that started out in your head as a tiny little idea and then becomes this finished product and looks like what you thought it would look like is a great feeling. And then there's a hugely vibrant community on Instagram for quilters. And that's actually how I got onto Instagram in the first place. So then it's really fun to not only, make my husband and my poor children have to admire my work, but to go out on Instagram and show a picture and say, hey, look what I just made. And so many people out there who just, give you a like or leave a comment. And it's fun to be able to share that with other people who enjoy the same type of thing.
Well, I'm glad you stayed home and quilted instead of bar hop. There we are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The iron, it caught me off.
Yeah.
By surprise. Like, what?
It freaks everyone out. Yeah. It's nice. I don't think that I would like it for clothing, but it's great for this because otherwise you're constantly doing this every time you go to use the iron. But then what's scary is when people are used to using this and they go back to a regular one and they leave it down and you're like, no, lift it, lift it.
Oh, man.
But yes, it's a pretty cool iron.
Thank you so much for watching. There's also more to explore with Kalamazoo Lively Arts on YouTube, Instagram, and WGVU.org. We'll see you next time.
Support for Kalamazoo Lively Arts is provided by the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation, helping to build and enrich the cultural life of Greater Kalamazoo.